I would suggest this is the one that is dear to Steve's heart, as they all have been over the years. This must have been a real challenge, probably even more challenging, Steve, than Sir Henry Redwood. And of course, I'm referring to one that probably you're going to learn a little bit now. We've got a cast of thousands here, haven't we, Steve, for this one? And the horse is a horse by the name of Moifaa.
You know, Steve Johnson said there were 30 people turned up to do the story, and this is the Johnny Frizzell from Waipakarau is here. Let me start down this end. I'll get through some of them, ladies and gentlemen, but first of all, joining me now is Margaret. Margaret, what is it to have a horse like this, part of the family history?
We grew up with the story of Moifaa, and everyone in the family heard about his jumping wins in New Zealand, and then the trip to Aintree and life in England. And it was really like a fairy tale for all of us, because then, of course, he ended up living in a royal stable. Yeah. So it was almost unreal. But after seeing the film tonight, it certainly is true, and something that makes us very proud.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, your relationship with Spencer?
He was my great uncle. Unfortunately, he didn't live in New Zealand as an older person, as a young man. He was educated in England. He lived most of his life there. He married a Scottish woman and lived in London and had his family there. And we have no contact with them except his grandson, who lives in France. And he's in his 80s now and not well enough to be here, but we've made a note tonight on a card wishing him well. He has a hip injury, and we hope that he gets that and realises that we've been at a very special evening tonight.
That is great. The family, did they know about the shipwreck? What was the gospel on the family? Did they know?
Oh, perhaps someone else better talk.
Yeah, I better talk. I'll ask Donald here. Donald Golan, you actually carry the right surname.
Yeah, that's true. One of our ancestors was called Donald Golan. In actual fact, Spencer's father was Donald Golan. He was one of the first to come to New Zealand in the Golan family. So that started that's our heritage, they're our ancestors, and that's where the Golan story in New Zealand started.
Can I just say too, we could have come to you and saved all that money with Steve Johnson, because you went over there, spoke to the family about this.
Yeah, I was lucky enough, Steve, to go to England, and I tracked down Spencer's daughter-in-law, Pamela Golan, and Pamela was married to Alexander Golan, and of course Alexander had passed away by the time I got to meet Pamela. But I was most fascinated to find their end of the story of Moifaa.
You actually recorded it on video?
I took about 5 hours of video. I sat down and interviewed Pamela, who I found a most fascinating woman, and it was 2 days of absolute, you just hung on every word. She had such a lot of stories to tell. And some of the ones of Moifaa that I remember, Steve, were that Spencer was particularly pleased that some of the Hollywood directors had phoned up because they were so enchanted with the story of Moifaa. They wanted to put it to film and make a movie of it. But Spencer, being a good Scotsman, he failed to close the negotiations to his benefit, so it didn't go anywhere in that respect. One of the other really fascinating stories that she told was that soon after Moifaa had arrived in the UK, prior to the 1904 Grand National, Spencer was out riding. He was a very, very accomplished sportsman himself and a very accomplished rider. He was out riding Moifaa, who of course had arrived in England out of season, so looked a really scruffy horse. One day he was out riding the horse and he came across two of the landed gentry who had beautiful thoroughbreds. They just happened to come across each other, so they challenged him to a point-to-point race and said, look, you can have a head start. So off he went. They gave him a reasonable head start. I think it was a furlong or two. Well, he absolutely, in this point-to-point race, he absolutely demolished them. And they were utterly astounded at the end of the race. They went up, shook his hands, and that race actually was for 100 guineas, so he made money on the bet. And he said to them then, he said, gentlemen, this horse is going to win the Grand National. You need to put a bet on this horse. The story finished when, at the 1904 Grand National, Moifaa was being led back into the birdcage, and these two gentlemen stepped up, shook Spencer's hand and thanked him for the tip. And they had put a lot of money on the horse, and they were very well off.